The dust has settled, the champion has been crowned, but what comes next now for NC State basketball?
You are Locked On Wolfpack, your daily podcast on the NC State Wolfpack, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Wolfpack Nation? It's time to get locked in with Locked On. Thanks for making Locked On Wolfpack your first listen each and every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcast and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Happy Tuesday to all. As always, I'm Grayson Boone, joined by former Wolfpack defensive tackle Kenton Gibbs. The NCAA basketball season has now come to a close. We're still celebrating the improbable run of NC State making it to the Final Four. But now, with the season officially over, what comes next for NC State? This, of course, means transfer portal season. We've talked a bit about the portal kind of going on in the background with NC State's hands obviously full with this tournament run. But now that they're out and we've already landed Brandon Huntley-Hatfield from Louisville, the work really ramps up to stay competitive in that portal and bring new talent here to Raleigh.
Yeah, Coach Keats has done a fantastic job of building through the portal, and he's going to continue to do so. That seems to be part of his permanent strategy, and he feels like portal gets much more intent and locked in than high school guys and all that good stuff. And as he's seen throughout his career, he tends to be right in that regard because we've had a lot more portal guys paying out, touchdown on campus, all that good stuff than NC State guys out of high school and all that good stuff. So I'm not very surprised that there is a lot of work being done in the portal here. It's just the beginning as the portal has been open, but now, there's no more game planning. There's no more of all the things that go into actual on-court basketball. It's all recruiting at this point.
It's kind of funny because our most consistent compliment of Keith throughout his tenure is that he has pulled off some impressive recruiting successes, although obviously not all of them ended up making it here to campus, but the amount of talent that Keith finds himself involved with is a lot to get excited about. And so for Keats to now go into another recruiting portal cycle, and you have, all the momentum you could possibly ask for this time around with an ACC championship, a Final Four run, the entire country was watching you do this. Keats had some comments kind of out of the side of his mouth last week about guys taking notice in what they were doing. Yes, there are probably several names that have gone above and beyond to reach out to NC State and demonstrate their interest in taking part of what Keats is building here. And so that is now the number one priority for NC State basketball these next couple weeks. These are crucial next couple weeks for getting into the portal because in a sense, you're kind of behind the eight ball. Not exactly the truth. You have already pulled off one big get, and that was a great start. But with all of this momentum built up, you got to feel like you're in a pretty good spot to reel in some more big fish.
Levi Watkins said last year, be patient.
Yes.
All of the signing isn't going to happen this week or during this window even. There's going to be players that sign early. There's going to be players that, slow play this thing till the end. Either way it goes, you've got to give this thing time to develop because, they're just coming off this magical run and all that. So they're just now fully focusing those efforts and energies on the portal.
And I do think that's good advice to heed in this offseason as well. This is going to take some time. And over the course of the next couple weeks, you will see names begin to start the transfer process out of NC State. We'll talk about the interesting situation of Ernest Ross here in just a second, but I wouldn't anticipate that he'll be the only one. And it's important to understand that anyone that still has eligibility could leave. All of them could stay, but all of them could also leave. That is how fluid the entire transfer portal operation has become. And NC State has been on the winning side of that the last 2 years. The last two portal recruiting classes got them to the dance twice, even despite not expecting to get back there. They got back there twice. And so it is imperative that Coach Keats cashes in on this momentum and brings in the next batch of talent that can get you back to the tournament and continue to make noise. There is no way you can let this amount of buzz fall by the wayside. You cannot afford to let a Final Four run and an ACC championship not turn into something more. You have to absolutely keep this going as hard as you possibly can. The time is now. You have to strike the time.
Yeah, and the biggest thing is all of these players who are transferring in can see, hey, Coach Keats has no problem playing transfers. You know,
Yes.
DJ Horn, DJ Burns, Casey Morcell, all transfers, all play big minutes. Jaden Taylor, transfer, play big minutes. Mo Diarra, Ben Middlebrooks, all transfers, all play big minutes. So, you know, there isn't a problem at all with Coach Keats and saying, hey, whoever the best guys are, that's who will play. Be it transfer, be it, you know, high school guy. If you are the best, you will play.
Yeah, and obviously, picking up Brandon Huntley Hatfield from Louisville, he's more than likely going to slot in as quote unquote DJ Burns replacement. But you're also going to have to replace Casey Morcell and you're going to have to replace DJ Horn. And that's no easy task. So I would certainly expect NC State to prioritize guards moving forward. That is kind of their MO anyway, year in and year out. We all know that Keats loves to build a team around his guards. There has been more names jumping into the portal in the last, 36 hours. That will continue. You're going to continue to see names that could draw a lot of interest from NC State. I can think of one right off the top of my head in Javon Small from Oklahoma State. I think he could be a spectacular fit for Kevin Keats' system. But as you see Wolfpackers put their name in the portal or decide to stay, I would advise you to not be really surprised by anything. Another important point here, sometimes it's not always the player's decision to enter the portal, because this week, early in this week, is when they're having these player coach meetings where it's a year in review. All the work that went into the season that just came to an end, they review it. They talk about what's going to happen moving forward and the next best steps for that player in particular. And sometimes it's very difficult conversations. You immediately look back like Dusan Mahorcic last year. He was a guy that openly said, I wanted to stay at NC State, but that's not how it turned out. And that is the harsh reality of this thing sometimes. But I say all that to say, don't be surprised that anyone leaves and don't be surprised that anyone stays. However this happens, the situation will remain extremely fluid, but we have faith in the coaching staff to bring in the best possible talent that they can.
Yeah, I absolutely believe that. And, if you don't believe after what we just saw, well, what else can make you a believer?
In the next couple days or so, because I know folks have started to ask about this type of thing, I want to put together basically an eligibility spreadsheet showing you exactly who can come back, the amount of eligibility they have left, and it just helps to further understand what NC State might really prioritize moving forward. I know a lot of folks were surprised that Michael O'Connell does have another year of eligibility. So if he chooses to exercise that, he can very well come back to NC State for one more year. But he's another guy, could also leave and spend another year somewhere else. I think it makes the most sense for him to stay here. Well, that's a story for another time. But anyone, Mo Diarra, Ben Middlebrooks, Jaden Taylor, any of these guys could decide to leave, but all of them could also decide to stay. So as I mentioned, it's a very fluid situation. It will remain so. So just buckle up and get ready for what should be another exciting offseason. Coming up next, we're talking about Ernest Ross and maybe a decision, maybe not the decision. We'll talk about that after a quick word from our sponsors. Our sponsor of the day is FanDuel. It's nearly playoff time in the NBA and NHL, and baseball is now in full swing. FanDuel is the place to bet on every game. Right now, new customers can get $150 back in bonus bets guaranteed. Yes, that's right, $150 win or lose. You can bet on everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks, all on an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet an automatic win. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Middle portion of our Tuesday show. Now wanted to take a couple minutes to talk about Ernest Ross. A little bit of an interesting situation here. On Monday, Ernest Ross posted on Instagram several pictures from this memorable postseason run with the caption 24 out. To the average onlooker, that would in fact look like perhaps he's entering the transfer portal. After about 30 more minutes went by, Pack Pride ran an announcement that Ernest Ross was entering the transfer portal. I even quote tweeted that saying, I wish Ernest nothing but the best. He is the ultimate teammate. Wherever he lands, we will be Ernest Ross fans. And I stand by that. Then shortly after that, Ernest put on his Instagram story that he had not, in fact, made up his mind yet. I'm not going to delete my tweet. I stand by everything I said. I think he's a spectacular teammate. The reason I say this, and this is with all due respect, I think it was so easy to believe that he would be transferring because it makes sense for Ernest Ross. And some folks have been asking us who we expect to go and expect to stay. The reality of the situation is he didn't play much this year. Not to say he wasn't an integral part of the team, because he was the energy on the bench that you cannot replicate. And for a lot of teams, that goes a very long way. He is an extremely invaluable member of this team. But when it comes to playing time, one who did not get much playing time this year, and you begin to start peeking at next year's roster, I feel like it would be much of the same. And you bring in a guy like Huntley Hatfield, you're hoping that Diarra Middlebrooks can return, possibly MJ Rice stays. You still have that amount of depth there, likely in front of Ernest Ross. And so it would be easy to understand if he does take his talents somewhere else. State fans are also not going to hesitate to keep him here in Raleigh. He is an excellent personality. Like I said, that's extremely invaluable to a team's success, is locker room guys. That is a real thing. You want to have guys in your foxhole that believe in you and push you to be your best. Ernest Ross is one of those guys. So we're certainly going to have to wait and see, a bit more patience to see how that transpires. But regardless, we wish Ernest Ross all the best.
I think the big thing with Ernest Ross is the energy that he provides also spreads to on the court.
Right.
When he's playing, he's also a very high energy guy. So I could see him staying and playing a role in that front court that is an expanded or increased role from this year, where there were many injury problems and whatnot that were alleged to be going on there. So, I wouldn't be too shocked to see Ernest Ross stay. Wouldn't be too shocked to see him go. But like Grayson said, we support him wherever he is, and it'd be great if he stayed in the red and white of NC State. But even if it's not here, he's got a fan in both of us.
And Ernest Ross is a guy that's been through a lot at State. He's had quite a bit of his own injury struggles at times, and we've seen the heights of Ernest Ross. The Miami game at home of 2023, where Ernest Ross went for like 21 points, I think, off of the bench, and he won that game. That was a ranked win for NC State, and Ernest Ross was the overwhelming reason we won that game. So he's had some very interesting highs here. He gives you that energy like Kenton was talking about, and sometimes it's enough to win you a game. He's not your prototypical bench player, I guess you could say, because he has a bit of experience in being an extremely valuable member on the court. But this year, he just found himself buried in the depth chart. And that's something we had concerns about coming into the season. You look at the 6 to 7 new faces that came in and where that would slot Ernest Ross in the lineup, and it played out much like we expected it to. So again, I certainly would understand if he would like to take his talents somewhere else. If you look at a mid-major for Ernest Ross, he'll get a lot of playing time, and he'll probably be a high-level contributor to mid-major teams in that way.
Him potentially being a key piece in that front court is a very strong possibility. I mean, we saw this year that the depth up front was a problem at times. When DJ Burns was going through different situations where he looked hobbled or he looked unwell, we could have used Ernest Ross and more depth and all that good stuff. And to be quite honest, and this is no disrespect to the guys that we have coming back, the DJ Burns we saw in the tournament was the DJ Burns we were expecting all year.
Yeah.
I don't think we have a single big that's at that level right now. Mo Diarra can certainly get there. I'd say he's the most likely candidate to get there. But even with him, I haven't seen it consistently enough to say, I know that if he doesn't do that, something's wrong. So I could see Ernest Ross stepping into a bigger role with this team next season.
None of this is discredit Ernest. I want to make that perfectly clear. None of this is to discredit the ability that he does have, but I just foresee a lot of the same depth concerns for Ross next year. I look at the possibilities and perhaps having to add another forward or two. I see that situation where perhaps he gets buried. And I would love Ernest to be that guy that rises above and slots into a very important role this year. Ernest Ross has been one of my favorite players on this team because of the games like last year in Miami or even Georgia Tech. That was another one where he came off the bench and gave you double-digit points. he has the ability. Based on the playing time that he received, perhaps the consistency is more of a concern for the coaching staff. But we love Ernest here. If he stays, that'd be fantastic. No one would complain about that. I could guarantee you that. But we're going to have to see how this shakes out. Ernest is a guy where you hope it is his decision, because I think he has earned that much. He's been here for 3 years with us. He's been through a lot. He's been a very valuable locker room guy. You hope that Ernest is the one that gets to make that decision. So we will certainly wait to see if that is the case here in the next couple weeks. And rounding out our Tuesday show, we will talk about assistant coach Joel Justice that is leaving the program and the hole that he will leave behind after a quick word from our sponsors. Last couple minutes here of our Tuesday show. Another announcement that did break on Monday. Assistant basketball coach Joel Justice has accepted a job with Ohio State. This is extremely well-deserved. And Coach Justice was a primary factor for the recruiting successes of the last 2 years. He's been on staff for Coach Keats for the last 2 seasons, and he played a large part in guys like Jarkel Joyner, DJ Horn, DJ Burns. He had a very large hand in bringing those guys here to NC State. And after everything we just went through, we're now forever indebted to the contributions of Coach Justice. And a postseason run like the one you just pulled off, losing coaches very quickly after that is a byproduct of that postseason success. And so this loss certainly stings, but the silver lining is if you lose a coach after a great season, it means you're getting somewhere. It means the floor of your program is rising. So we certainly hate to see Coach Justice go, especially right now, as the transfer portal has quickly become the number one concern for NC State. They're going to have to find a way to rally the troops. You're going to have to add another assistant coach to the staff, and you're going to have to obviously find a way to continue your momentum in this transfer portal.
Yeah, for sure. And Joel Justice is going on to become the associate head coach, which I believe means when the next guy or when the current guy retires, he steps up to take that role, which is, it's obviously a promotion. That's obviously a situation where they, as the old saying goes, great leaders don't hope that their subordinates will go on to become leaders. They know that they will. They expect them to. And I feel like that's the situation with Kevin Keats here, and knowing that Coach Justice was going to move on at some point in time, and knowing that there will be other coaches that move on from Raleigh at some point in time. But like you said, this does leave a hole that needs to be filled in terms of game planning, in terms of recruiting, in terms of road mapping, what we need talent-wise. Those are all things that Joel Justice did at a high level. And so now it's time for this team to kind of get some new fresh blood in that role and kind of, make something happen there.
And Coach Justice carries quite an impressive resume with him, and that's kind of the reason you didn't expect him to stay at NC State for all of that long. Is this guy does what he does at an extremely high level, and the rest of the country takes notice after he has success at his next stop. And he was at Kentucky for quite an amount of time. He spent time with some of the best players that you have heard come out of Kentucky in the last 7 to 8 years. A lot of those were Joel Justice success stories. And so when you carry a resume like that, and then you go to Arizona State and you work under Bobby Hurley, who that name carries a lot of weight this time of year, then you go to NC State, you make it to the tournament back-to-back years, you're an ACC champion, you make it to the Final Four, your reputation precedes you. And that is the exact reason Ohio State is looking at this opportunity and, saying we need a guy like this on our staff. Like I said, Joel Justice gets a ton of credit for all the success that Coach Keats and the NC State men's basketball program has enjoyed here the last 2 years. In the 2 most pivotal years of Keats' tenure, Boo Corrigan was one that gave Keats the freedom to say, look, whatever you need on your coaching staff, we need to go out and get, because we got to get you guys right. Joel Justice was at probably the top of that list for Keats to bring in to his staff. And then it paid immediate dividends. So, a humongous thank you to Joel Justice. Again, your contributions will never be forgotten here at NC State. Everything that you did in recruiting and coaching for this team was a large part of bringing hope back at NC State, bringing the belief back, bringing the buzz back at NC State. That will never be forgotten. We wish him nothing but the best moving forward, and hopefully we get to see him thrive at his next role so much as it doesn't interfere with NC State.
Yeah, and I'd love to see who the candidates are to replace him. I'd love to see the list of names of folks who are, said to be the next one up for this role, because I think that there are, again, not just players looking at you after a Final Four round like, oh, what's going on here, but coaches as well. So I'd love to see what happens in that regard.
Yeah, that's a great point. And, Coach Keats and the rest of his staff, they do have to act quickly on this. As I mentioned, you find yourself now in the middle of portal season, and to replace a guy like Joel Justice and the recruiting talent that he has, that's no easy task. The breakneck speed of this turnaround is something that is a little bit of a concern, not so much in a negative way, but it has to be addressed as soon as possible. And to continue the momentum that you're building and trying to build off of a Final Four run going into next year, the NIL efforts are very crucial. The fan support is very crucial. And like Kenton was talking about, sometimes it's not only just players that are taking notice of your program. So it will be certainly interesting who some of the top prospects emerge as. Perhaps we won't even hear about it, because a lot of the time assistant coaching searches are very close to the vest. So whether we hear things or we don't hear things, this is a pivotal development for the future success of NC State basketball. We're putting a lot of faith in Coach Keats to go out and get the next Joel Justice, because they're out there somewhere. You just got to be able to find them and then reel them into Raleigh. We wish Coach Justice the best. Big loss for NC State. Certainly going to have to find a way to replace them as quickly as possible. That'll do it for us here on Tuesday. As always, thank you all so much for joining us. Be sure to hit that like button. Drop your comments in the comment box. Tell us what you think about potentially the future of Ernest Ross. Tell us what you think about Coach Joel Justice taking his talents up to Columbus. And tell us what you think could be next on the horizon for NC State in terms of recruiting. Tell us all that, and while you're at it, mash that subscribe button. Tell a friend to do the same, and we will see you all tomorrow. Until then, go Pack.
Go Pack.